you want it to be successful, you must have. And then there's some sort of second order goals we'll talk about as well. So again, these are codes, these types of codes are not useful, and I would stress this repeatedly even though some may disagree with me. These are not codes that you'll use everywhere. These are codes that are useful to create places that are walkable and mixed use, that have that particular ambiance to it. I would not advocate for the use of form-based codes as a complete replacement for all of your development codes in the community. But, most of our communities, or virtually all of our communities, have existing suburban development that's probably going to be there for a very, very long time. May not ever change. And it's pointless for us to say we're just going to throw out all of our zoning techniques that we use today. This is a supplement and it's a replacement that allows us to understand how we can really code effectively for places that have that characteristic of walkable, mixed-use environments. Places, whatever scale they're at, whether it's a place like the Plaza, whether it's a small town environment like a place like a Weston, if you're trying to create that ambiance, or a very large city, like a large city downtown, those are the applications where it is going to be most effective, is if you have a place or multiple places in your community where you really want to create that ambience. And the two primary goals that we're always trying to get back to is we're trying to have walkability and diversity. And so both of those imply a lot of things, and both of those then you will see, as you look through these codes, that's what a lot of the standards are gearing to support. They're gearing to support a quality pedestrian environment, which means that you have fairly compact neighborhoods, you have streets that are designed as a balance for people walking and riding a bike, you have destinations that are worth walking to. And by diversity, we mean diversity in building type, primarily. So that it's not a monoculture of sort of one kind of building over a particular area. It allows a community to age and diversify and deal with the market in a variety of manners. And the ideal then is that you create neighborhoods and communities where people can sort of move around and live in that community through the course of their life without necessarily having to leave it. But there's a housing choice, there's an example of something for them in that neighborhood. So everything is mixed together in that neighborhood. And it goes back to this old planning diagram, which I use all the time, which looks at the foundation of these is sort of the neighborhood as a quarter-mile radius or a 5-minute walk from center to edge. It's a very basic planning principle. It's very time-worn and proven, but again, if you can create neighborhoods where you have things within about that 5 to 7 minute walk range, people generally will walk. If you have your planning basis that it goes to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, people generally will not walk because it just seems a little too far for most of us, and I count myself in that range as well. We all sort of default to whatever's easiest for us to do, and if it takes you 15 minutes to walk somewhere, even if the walk is really good, most of us probably won't do it. We'll look for some other way to get there. So within that neighborhood radius, or that sort of theoretical radius, you have the idea of the mix of building types and mix of uses. The other thing that's critical is to understand the difference between what we call fabric buildings and civic buildings. And most of the code is written to guide the development of what we call fabric buildings. These are buildings that form the basic backbone of all of our communities and neighborhoods. These are the basic residential, commercial, mixed-use buildings that make up the street wall, that creates the street space or the outdoor room. And so the character of that now can vary, dramatically. So in this particular example, this is in Brookside. Those fabric buildings are residential buildings, for the most part. But there's a consistency in how they're placed relative to the street, to their height, to the landscaping treatment, to the street treatment, etc. And these are buildings that really create the background. And the civic buildings are the ones that then we use to highlight that you see in the foreground a lot of times. And I'll show some examples. So if you look at Brookside and plan, these are those sort of streets that create the fabric. And in the commercial area, you have that as well. A civic building would be like the school right here, that's right in the middle. A church, a significant church, a community structure of some kind. A building that's on an important site. that is something that is a community building that we all relate to. In Lawrence, for example, on Mass Ave in Lawrence, the fabric, are those sort of very basic commercial and mixed-use buildings that line and create that street wall. If you look at any one of these buildings in isolation, you're probably not going to be awed by the architecture. It's just, we generally don't sort of walk down that street, even in a place like Lawrence and go, wow, that's just a great building. You just walk down the street and it sort of disappears a little bit. You notice that there are things there, and you notice the storefronts and the experience as you're walking along. But what the nature of that building itself is, especially up 2 or 3 stories, you don't often see. But that fabric is what creates the background. And then here you can see the plan. I do some teaching at UMKC in the urban planning department as well, and I love to challenge my students to draw a plan that's as boring as that. It's very hard. Very hard for students to draw just really straight, simple things, because you think, oh my God, that's just the most boring drawing ever. But, again, in a plan view or an aerial view, it doesn't really tell the story, because the story is how you experience it on the ground. And in this particular case, like in Lawrence, here's the basic fabric along here at the end of Main Street, here's City Hall. And that's the Civic Building. The Civic Building that terminates your view as you're walking down the street that you notice. At the southern end, you have the courthouse. The courthouse is the Civic Building that really terminates the south end of Mass Ave. That's the building, again, that you notice. It's on a prominent site. It's adjacent to the park. That's the basic idea between sort of fabric and civic buildings.